And it is truly a pleasure to introduce the keynote. Um, and this is a very special introduction because if I were to tell you my journey into higher education, and I consider my mentor, Dr. Ravi Kumar, is truly the one individual I identify as my mentor, a friend, somebody who has literally provided me sort of a horizon scan and also the vision of what that journey should look like. So Dr. Kumar, his background obviously is MS in industrial engineering from UT Arlington and his PhD in industrial engineering and management science from Northwestern. So from 1987 to 2013, he was a professor of operations management in Department of Information and Operations. We now consider that as a data science and operation, where he served as a department chair, vice dean for international and graduate programs. So in fact, when you think about USC Marshals, the link, the global programs, including the supply chain that I now actually lead both as an academic director and executive director, that was the concept and vision of Ravi. From 2009 to 2011, he served as distinguished professor and a dean of College of Business at Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, KAIST. From 2013 to 2018, then he took over as a short chair professor of Nanyang Business School in NTU in Singapore, where he served as a dean and associate provost. During his tenure, NBS was globally ranked by the Financial Times as number 10 for MBA, number 22 for its MBA, and he helped raise over $35 million. Professor Kumar has received awards for teaching excellence both at the University of Illinois as well as USC. He has been an author and co-author for more than 70 articles in international peer-reviewed academic journals. Global companies have funded his research as well as National Science Foundation. It is my pleasure to welcome my dear friend, Ravi Kumar.
Thank you, Nick. Appreciate your introduction. But this program that we have at USC would not be a success. But for our friend Nick here, I truly needed a industry specialist to start off, and then he became the academic director also. So he is the be-all, end-all of our master's program and our center. But back to my own uh, background, it's a wonderful pleasure to be here at the Supply Chain Directors Conference and addressing you all. Uh, I've been in education since 1975, doing my PhD at Northwestern, and I retired in 2018. As Nick mentioned, I've had international experience dealing with faculty and programs in Korea and Singapore, but most of my time was spent at USC. Uh, but before I came to USC, I was at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. I joined as a assistant professor, and I was asked to teach a course called Production Planning and Inventory Control. That was what it was called in those days. It was not supply chain, but MPC, PPIC, inventory management, distribution management. In fact, at that time, I actually got my students to get hands-on experience with IBM's software called Copix and IBM's Mapix. This really ages me, really. No, and we used to use the mainframes and IBM AS400s as a technology at that time. And we've come a long way since then. And as as being in Los Angeles with the ports that we have, I in 2008 I actually proposed a Master of Science in Global Supply Chain Management, and our deans and administrators at that time said, uh, just a big yawn, saying, "Who cares?" And then in 2011, 2012, when I came back from Korea, I once again said this is an important area. and recommended this master's degree program with connections to China, Korea, and India. And once again, they said goodbye and good luck. We're not going to help you much. But in spite of it all, we did bring together this program on supply chain management with Nick's help and leadership. This whole area is now come a long way. Now, you people are uh, 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 the marks of success in supply chain management. Uh, it's become common nomenclature now. Even our dean speaks of supply chain management. Even our president, Biden, speaks of supply chain management, asking for a report on the supply chains of various important uh, parts of our economy and what the country's policy should be towards that. Every media journalist, radio, TV programs are interested in news about supply chain. Our Professor Nick is on NPR and various news media channels talking about supply chains. Our students, all of your programs are extremely successful and have students flocking to it, knowing the importance of this area, not just for a job, but also in the future for their careers as such. Companies are rushing to hire students from our programs. And again, it's a big success that our companies are realizing this notion of supply chain is so important. And as administrators, as a dean, the money that can be made from programs like this, plus the idea that there are donors that are available to fund programs and scholarships and various other aspects, have become make it very important for business schools as well as universities to be in this area of supply chain. Uh, and as administrators of these programs, you have a lot of things that you have to think about in making these programs better. As Dean Jeff talked about, all these disruptions that are going on in this world, geopolitical different changes. We talk about global warming. You talk about Brexit. No, when I started teaching, we were all individual countries doing their own supply chains. And then we talked about globalization and how these are all coming together. Now we're starting to see them regionally breaking apart again because of these geopolitical risks and even global ge- uh, geographic risks that we face these days. All these, and the technology does change dramatically today with the internet and distance learning, various technologies, AR, VR, a variety of these things are also changing the way we do supply chain management. And all these, we need to now be talking about how to educate our students about how this is going to impact the function and the area of supply chain as we see it globally. But today, my talk is not on that. My talk is on how we actually do the education to our students, how we get them prepared, and are we really doing a good job of that? So that's where my whole thought process is in addressing this session. It's really, do we have a new model of for higher education? How are we going to do education from a different perspective? And so, next slide, please. Before that, I want to go back to some of the ills of what has happened in the last 30, 40 years. I've been in this country since 1975. And there are certain things that have happened in the education industry, which are just unconscionable in my thinking. When I came to this country, I went to UT Arlington. The the cost of a course, I paid $500 for taking two courses in the summer semester when I first came in before I got onto scholarships. But that was a cost, $500 per semester. At the same time, in 2009, my daughter went to an Ivy League school, and I was paying $50,000 a year for her college tuition. And if you look at this graph here, at the macro level, college tuition costs have just expanded dramatically, even compared to healthcare costs, just unimaginable increases. Next slide, please. Continuing on, even at the micro level, when you look at CPI indices, here again, the cost of medical care as part of CPI went up 100%, but the cost of college tuition has gone up by 170%. Now, again, I think it's just not sustainable as far as education industry is concerned. Next slide, please. And the cost of education, as I've done my research, shows that part of it, in the state schools at least, because the states have cut down the subsidies and the funding of higher education, this has become a problem for most state schools. And therefore, the tuition fees have been shifting from the state's subsidies to actually making the students pay for it. Uh, 41, as the slide shows, 41 states since 2008 have spent 13% less per student, and tuition has risen almost 37% on average at 4-year public colleges and such. And they're trying to cope with it in a variety of ways by cutting programs, cutting faculty positions, sometimes eliminating course offerings, and doing things I'm not sure which is good for the purpose of education. Next slide, please. If it doesn't all be okay if this cost was met by jobs available and at incomes that are also rising, in which case education is to be seen as an investment, and there's a return on that investment, and the return comes from better careers and jobs that can pay the money invested in education. But unfortunately, this is not true. This has not occurred in this country. If you look at 1971, the average college cost was 8,700. In 2016, is 20,000. But if you look at the incomes of women or men, there's an dramatic increase in how much the median income is to pay the college costs as such. And so the income streams have not kept up with the increase in the college cost. So the return on investment has not been there in education. Next slide, please. And as outcomes of this, it is also true that it has become important for students to get a college education, and streams of students have been moving to college education, even though the incomes have not been there. And therefore, the student debt has become a crisis in this country at the macroeconomic level. Over $1.6 trillion as of June 2020, and it's increased since 107% since end of 2008. And again, as I said, there's no, the return on investment is not there. Thinking if you look at average debt has increased from 20,000 to $37,000 in 2018. To again try to get away from this, universities and schools have started moving towards getting foreign students to pay for the full fees for the programs, and trying to increase the revenue streams from that sector. And but the last administration put some barriers for visas, etc. That's become static now, and I'm not sure that's a good way in which we should be moving towards keeping the increase in education costs, as well as trying to increase the revenue streams. Because I've seen examples in Australia, in Singapore, in New Zealand, where they went towards getting more foreign students to pay for their educational budgets. And when it comes to geopolitical risks, China stopped its students from going to Australia. At one time, India stopped students from going to Australia. And that country really took a big hit on their educational processes. depending on it's a bigger risk as far as I'm concerned, and that may not be the right thought process in mitigating this rise in costs as such. So what do we do? So, and besides me, there are a lot of people who have been thinking about it. Let me tell you about 4 different thought processes in this. Next slide, please. The first one is a article in McKinsey. This was by a McKinsey ex-partner who's also the current dean at Johns Hopkins, and together with a strategy professor, they wrote this article in 2018. And typically, this is a classic strategy course, MBA strategy course analysis, which says universities are like diversified conglomerates. Here are some issues. The issues are that they are carrying inefficient academic units. There are immovable human resources, faculty, and they have assets, real estate assets that are not being utilized effectively. So go ahead and restructure these programs and universities with a allocate resources based on both academic and economic interest. And that's their solution to how to resolve this issue that we have in academic institutions as such. Next slide, please. The next article, this was in Chronicle just last year, and this is by an ex-finance and education leader, and now he works at a education think tank, very similar to the previous analysis, but he goes further to say, can we now utilize the technology available today to make it more efficient and effective? And second, the better use of valuable real estate that we have. So again, putting into context that we're not utilizing our assets very well, or the changes in the environment that through technology we're not utilizing it well, and maybe we should be doing that. Analytics, he's talking about data analytics and artificial intelligence being used also to fine-tune where we are allocating our resources. So that's what this article talks about. The next slide, please. This is our own Professor Nick's dissertation here at USC. And Nick comes in from an operations perspective and looking at the education environment from a lean perspective, lean operations, lean enterprise system, adopting quality management and lean frameworks. And he did intensive research on this, on various universities that have adopted some of these things. And his research shows that by improving service quality and reducing waste, one can make tremendous improvements in cost containment, which can now be turned into better reducing the cost to the student, as well as improving the quality of education that goes on. Using emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, etc., again can improve the effectiveness of education and reduction of waste. So that's his thesis here, documented by certain examples from universities that have adopted these processes. Next slide. The last article I've talked about is this year in the AACSB. This is by our dean from our accounting school. He is very cognizant of the distance education that we've adopted, and his attitude is, we've done wonderfully well with online education, various innovations in online education, and we've got group discussions, and we got virtual visitors, and we've got the individual interactions with faculty, and giving also looking at individual student progress that can be looked at even closely, feedback from students on what they learn. He talks about all the positives of how we're using online education and innovation in that. But his end of his conclusion is that we want online to be as efficient as in class. It's again, the understanding of what is online, what is in class is not there. These seem to be conflicting or competing options to educate. And so I'm not very comfortable with that view of education from my perspective. Next slide, please. So, in my opinion, there is something that we are not addressing clearly in education today, and which is the the core process of education. No, that we are still doing lecturing in our classes. We're still using the same methodologies that we used before in our classroom environment in how we impart education. Even though, if you look at it from an operations perspective, in operations, we talk about inputs, transformation process, and output. And each of these things are changing dramatically and should be changed dramatically in how we conduct our educational processes. From the input side, our students today are tech savvy. They are exposed to gaming, virtual reality, video games, audio, augmented reality. They are exposed to technology right from when they were young, and we are not really taking advantage of the kinds of skill sets that they bring along with them. Our education processes are not taking advantage of this. The inputs that we're getting, and we are still thinking of our inputs as it was 50 years ago. And that is not acceptable from an educational process. From the output side, as Dean Jeff Garrett mentioned, not only do we need our students to be adaptive, creative, we need them to be, now today with the internet, we need them to be self-learning. We need them to be a team, peer-to-peer learners, learning from other people and be able to check what is coming in the internet to see what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. And we need our students not to communicate, but to be able to persuade, persuasion skills. We need our students to be different things. That our companies, the employers are asking for a different set of different skill sets in our students when they come out of our programs. And again, I think our education mission does not encompass this part of the process, the output skills that are demanded as such. And in the transformation process, we are using our most highest valued paid resource, our faculty, in, and we're not using them at the highest value adding part of education and learning. We're still using them for information dissemination, which can be done in various other ways, much cheaper, much more effective. But we're still using our faculty in the same way as we've done thousands for thousands of years that we've been doing this. And again, we have to rethink the way we are allowing our faculty members to play a role. And so this whole process, what I call the core process of education, has to be re-engineered to adapt, to accommodate the different inputs that we are getting, the different outputs that are expected, and how to more effectively use technology and our highest paid faculty members in the process of learning and education. And this is important for us to understand. Let me give you an example of this in the context of medical school, but which we did do in Singapore when I was there. Now, this is a brand new medical school that was created at Nanyang Technological University. And when the first group of students, 40 students came in, they were all given iPads, they were given e-resources, they were concepts where on their own, they could learn on their own. And they were, as they were learning this on their, what we call self-learning parts of their education, they were being assessed on the concept and whether they have learned it. And so there was a phase of their self-learning that came in with just the faculty not involved, but involved in curating the kinds of resources that these students need to understand the concepts that the students had to master. Then came the labs and the simulation in the labs to solidify the concepts, the actual looking at the heart, dissecting all these things in the lab environment with lab assistants, with no faculty really in there. Also, the faculty, there are other people who are much more capable in managing that part of the learning process. And that is a middle, that is what we call peer-to-peer learning and experiential learning that comes into play in that phase. The last phase is where the faculty, the highest paid faculty, the doctors, are extremely necessary. And as somebody said, face to face can never be taken away from the process of education. And this is where the students are taken to hospitals to visit real patients. And then the teams are asked to diagnose and to actually come up with solutions for the maladies that they see. And if and the faculty member is pushing them, prodding them, and making them think whether that is that the answer or could something else be the answer, to really to give them knowledge of how to solve real problems and not the symptoms of the problems, and how to be creative about it. So this example of the medical school, at least from to my experience, has taught me that education can be done not just in the medical school, but in right from, I think, K through 12 all the way through to community colleges and in higher education. We can do a much better job in what we should be doing as education. So my new paradigm for learning, as the slide talks about, is there's a phase of self-learning that is very important that we get involved in, where materials are, the concepts, materials are curated, and students are learning on their own, and you're assessing them as they learn, and you're watching them. If if they don't understand the conceptual part of it, maybe there's a game that they can play, or they can watch a video, or some way in which you're watching them and you're assessing them. And once you get the have got the idea, the concept, you move on to the next concept. So a way in which to, in a structured way, allowing them to learn on their own, automatically shifting modes of education from maybe a lecture or to a PowerPoint presentation to a game or to a video or a different modes there. So that is part of the self-learning part of it. Then, of course, the students have to be brought together on a peer-to-peer learning mode where they're learning about each other and how each of them came to conclusions in different ways, to respect each other, ideas, to teach each other, to learn from each other. These are all skill sets that they need when they go into the real world, where they work. So this peer-to-peer learning is an extremely important part of the learning experience. The third part, of course, is the faculty-aided learning, which is where faculty comes in and where they're applying the concepts to real problems. And it could be cases, it could be experiential company projects, it could be simulation, it could be a variety of ways in which you can bring that into where they're working in teams and they're analyzing that and coming up with creative solutions. And again, with the technology that we have today, as Dean Garrett was mentioning, how can we bring in global industry to help this educational process? How can we connect our alumni, our global alumni into the educational process to give the students some grounding in terms of things that they see from other experts in this area, not just the faculty, but other experts in the area. Next slide, please. So when I talk about faculty and education, it's really what has been called a flipped class model, where real problems are given to the faculty by the faculty or executives in the classroom to students, and the students now have to analyze, recognize what the issues are, synthesize what is happening in the environment, then identify what the real problems are, make some reasonable assumptions, and of course, come up with innovative solutions and present, defend, and persuade that their ideas are the best, which is what they have to do when they go into the real world, whether at the team level or at the board level. This is what happens, and getting our students to go through this experience in multiple courses along their education gets them to understand and imbibe these skill sets that I think are important for them. Next slide, please. So if you look at the education in the past, we talk about faculty education and group discussion, so lecturing and homework, etc., as mechanisms. Group discussions we always have had, and then we have said offline or online. This is what has been the way we discuss education. My attitude is it's not about education; it's about learning, and we need our students to have self-learning skills. Need to build that in. We need our students to have peer-to-peer learning and also teaching that they have to do to help them get those skills. And finally, of course, the faculty-aided experiential learning has to be there as part of their learning. And this can be done either in a physical learning space or an online learning space, virtual learning space. And the choice is where we understand what is the best way that the student learns. It's not doing it on a mass basis, but it's doing it on an individual basis, and whatever works for that student in learning is what we should be looking at. And that's very important for us to keep in mind. Next slide, please.
Are you open to taking a Q&A, or you want to wait till the end?
I'd rather finish and then take the questions, Nick, if you don't mind. Next slide, please. So key principles, I'll quickly go through my slides now. The key principles again are online resources, curating the self-learning part of it, faculty playing a role in that, okay? The curation of the self-learning aspects, the collaborative this thing and how they learn from each other, having lab assistants, etc., to now learning experiences in team-based, peer-to-peer learning. Of course, faculty interactions in the classroom, in the flipped class model, or watching students as they learn. That interaction between faculty and students, it'll be there. And finally, the visibility of everything that the student does and the feedback that you can give them is also an extremely important part of this process of change. And next slide, please. So this whole idea of the new way of education is, using technologies, gaming technologies, immersion technologies, AR, VR. Our students, our children are all adept at games, and the gaming industry is a huge industry, and our students are hooked on this. How can we not get them hooked on games of learning itself? And this is where we should be investing part of it, our investment in education to get that to happen. Using AI to help us, the technologies to help us in not just grading, etc., but in plagiarism, but also in looking in on the student as they go along and identifying where they need help and support, where we need interventions to make sure that they are learning better and they are graduating. We cannot afford them not to graduate, and so ways in which to help them complete their programs out there, and also to document their learning process as they are now programs for 1 year or 1.5 years, whatever it is, to document that and encapsulate that as a living document that they can take wherever they go, rather than just a grade sheet and a lifeless degree certificate, which doesn't tell anybody what they have learned or what skills that they have. We need to think of different ways in which to encapsulate their education and learning experience while they are there with us and that we're watching them. We need to now figure out how to do that better. And if you go to extreme level, why not think of not selling products like a master's degree, or rather than thinking of education as a service and actually as a subscription service, just like Microsoft sells Windows or GE sells jet engines. These are all on use basis and as a subscription basis, and that's what you're charging for. So even think of education model itself changing dramatically from a product orientation to a service orientation, as it should be. Next slide, please. So we have, and I have, these are not pie in the sky kinds of things. The next example at Nanyang Technological University, next slide, please, is is something that we have done. In 2013, I was there in Nanyang Business School as a dean, and what we did there and as an associate provost at NTU, I was in the cabinet of the president. The whole university committed to this, that we evolved university strategy on learning and technology-enabled learning. Next slide, please. To do this, we needed an ecosystem of getting faculty ready to do this. So as dean of the business school, I committed my business school to 20% of our courses in the next 3 years will be converted to technology-enabled education. And I had to commit to that and execute on that. So this is something that I did while I was there the first 3 years. We had about 20 of our courses converted in 3 years. And these are core finance courses, core operations courses, core courses that we're teaching undergraduates, not even at the graduate level. At the undergraduate level is what we focused on. And this is something that we did. Next slide, please. Uh, Again, there are two parts to this transformation. One is the pedagogy, the functional aspects of it, and then there's the technology, what is best for the student, and are we ready for that to implement it, the software needed, the hardware needed, the technology needed, AI needed. So all this had to be thought through in this process of content transformation to be ready to do this kind of education. Next slide, please. And we actually built buildings for the peer-to-peer learning. There's a concentric building that we built just for students to be working in teams. No faculty allowed. It is just for peer-to-peer learning. We built one building called the Hive on the south side of the campus. Next slide. One building in the north side of the campus called the Arc, just for peer-to-peer learning. So investments in the infrastructure, and each of these classrooms complete with technology, availability of everything, all the electronic resources that is possible that we could get our hands on, that a faculty said would be needed. So all this was done in the 5 years that I was there. Tremendous investments and shift in what we were trying to do in the education environment to convert it into learning. So all this is like one easy to, if we did it there, easy to say and armchair theorize, but to do this needs leadership at the university level. And in Singapore's case, the Singapore government demanded that the only resources that Singapore has is its human resources. And they felt that we had to improve the way we were educating because their prize resources had to be brought up to the higher skills that could be competitive in the world of human resources. So important to them. So state support was needed. Investments were made, are needed. Accreditation regulation, like the Western Association of Schools and Colleges. As you change your program in this fashion, you have to get approvals to be able to get the Pell Grants, etc. So accreditation regulation requirements are there. The faculty and staff, as usual, resistance to change will be there. And how do you now manage this process is not simple. Decision making, what do we need in the short run? What do we need in the long run? A variety of issues of decisions that have to be done. Do we insource the technology, outsource the technology? How do we manage projects? And finally, the implementation of technology and maintenance and upgrades. All these are issues that come along with any change management programs. So I'm going to leave it there and I'll open myself to questions. Thank you so much for listening to me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so very much. I think this was very insightful and timely and very thought-provoking. So we greatly appreciate that. But let's take the very first question from Giovanni. Giovanni, you want to unmute yourself and
hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate your view. Thanks so much. I just would like to ask, based on this new paradigm for learning, if that approach doesn't risk government or whoever the funder, the funding institutions of universities to sideline faculty entirely, throwing the baby with the bathwater. Because from a government perspective, maybe from their view, the main role of higher education is probably to impart information. And if this role gets transferred to technology, then whatever alternative or supportive role is left for faculty might not be recognized or funded as relevant. So faculty might become even illegitimate and irrelevant. So do you agree with that view, or is that such a risk or not?
Yes, I do agree with that risk. If the faculty does not create value beyond just the transformation or just the dissemination of information, I don't think the faculty should be used. Then the only thing that we have is the degree certificate that we give on it. And that's all that we have. And that can be diluted quite easily. No, it's not that we have a monopoly on degree granting. And so your faculty are the key to curating the learning and what should be learned. The faculty are the ones who are the implementation and how the concepts are brought to practice. They're making sure that our students learn how it's done. That's where our faculty have to be to really create value for the kinds of resources that are put into faculty human resources. And so we do need our faculty to step up into more value addition. I think this technology, the disruption in this field is going to occur, and to keep ahead of this, we need to change this model and to identify clearly where our faculty can be more useful. And the kind of faculty we need to get that to happen also is very important. The faculty who do research for academic purposes, we need them for branding, and we need faculty who are also experiential, who now get into the implementation of concepts. We need different kinds of faculty in a university. And that's how the university administrators have to think about their faculty portfolio.
Good question. So we have time for one more thought. Any?
Dr. Kumar, this is Dr. Jack Cronin from Tuskegee University. Great presentation. I hope hopefully these presentations can be shared. Just a real quick question, because I'm very interested in this space, because I think that academia is changing faster than people consider, so or thinking about. So a couple of questions. What are your thoughts on alternative education routes, and then what are your also thoughts about like last mile education? For instance, students go through a process, or they get their quote unquote degree, and then but they go to another place to get the quote unquote skill sets that organizations are seeking, and then they're ready to then they're market ready. Thank you.
I think different ideas are wonderful. So in your model, the skill sets that I think talking about the academic conceptual things that are done in our university, and there's another organization that will build in capabilities for being ready for industry, is separated from the academic institution. Is that what the question is?
Repeat that again, sir. I'm sorry.
That you're breaking up the education that I'm talking about into two pieces. One is the academic part that the university does, and the next one is the industry specifics to some other organization which does that. Is that the model that you're
Yes. Yes, I think I've recently seen it in articles in which, again, a student finished, let's just say, a business management degree, but they haven't been placed. So a third party, something similar to a recruiting, kind of like a typical recruiting company would come, but they're aligned with various groups of people that.
I understand.
Right.
I understand. My immediate thing is what this other company is doing is what I call rework. That the product that he produced was not the quality needed, and hence there's rework done to make it ready for the industry. And that means the initial education was not done well from my
Correct.
perspective.
That's my concern, because
That is-
basically what they're saying is that, okay, go to the University of X, and then but when you're finished, then come to us and we got you.
That's unconscionable from a university perspective, because you are the ones who are supposed to make them, educate them and get them the returns on the investment that they're making in education. And if you say, no, I've done my job, I've taken their tuition, I've given them a degree, and that's all I need to do, and walk away, and that they have now reskilled themselves and invest more in getting ready for their job sets, I think that's unconscionable.
Okay, I agree with you, but again, that's what keeps me up at night, because many more of these are popping up. So,
and that's why and that's because universities are not changing what they're doing. That is the reason why we need to change how we are doing, what we are doing, and how we're getting them in return on an investment, looking at the output and what skills that are needed there. As Dean Jeff Gash mentioned, adaptive skills, all these other skills that we talk about, self-learning skills, peer-to-peer learning skills, all these things, we are not embedding them in our education process. And that is not good enough for us. That should not be good enough for higher education or any education.
Ravi, one more question. I know. Go ahead. Escape.
Yes. So, hi, Dr. Ravi Kumar. Thanks for the presentation. It's absolutely wonderful. I have a quick question. So, this technology enabled learning process, how does it connect with the willingness to learn? Do you see a connection, or is there a connection between this and the willingness to learn in what you would like to see in students?
I think it's a wonderful question. You're absolutely right. Education is a it's not one way. Both of them have come together to learn. But at the same time, we know our children get hooked on games, and they learn, and there's ways in which to get them excited about certain things. Now, why can't we get them excited using the same tools that the gamers use in getting them excited about learning about what we want to teach them? I think in some sense, it's a failure to use the right kinds of tools and to embed the incentives to learn, and the kinds of things that they need, dynamic kinds of education that they're looking for. Our current students, our new incoming students. And when we lecture, if they're bored, they miss the lecture, they pull up their phones and they start twiddling with it. We don't grab their attention. And how do we now grab their attention? By using the right kinds of tools and technology. And the willingness to learn will emerge automatically by the way we structure education in itself, in my opinion, at least. If we do it well, we can get that done. I'm absolutely sure we can get that done. We are creative enough, innovative enough to be able to do that.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. Appreciate it.
Ravi, once again, thank you so very much. I know you have a busy morning, and thanks for taking time, sharing an incredible insight and outlook for the higher education. So we all appreciate you taking time. So thank you very much.
My time in education is over. You are the people who have to carry this ball and run with it. And I wish you all the best in all that you do. Thank you very much.